So today are the Iowa Caucuses, and for the first time in more than a year, we're finally going to get some results in this 2020 Democratic presidential primary. And the polling in Iowa looks fantastic for Bernie. As I noted last night and over the past few days and weeks, the polling in Iowa shows Bernie Sanders winning. It shows him having the strongest first ballot support and shows him often coming away with the most delegates at the end of the night. But Iowa is just the first step. 8 days from now, New Hampshire is going to have its primary, and polling there is even better for Bernie Sanders. Emerson released a poll last night, and it has Bernie Sanders at 29%, more than double his nearest competitors, Biden, Buttigieg, and Warren, who are at 14, 13, and 12%. Bernie is doubling up second, third, and fourth place, more than doubling them, really, and it shows that Bernie Sanders has an absolute dominant hold on the New Hampshire primary, at least right now. And it also matters that Bernie Sanders, among those top four, is the only one moving in a positive direction. Buttigieg is down 5, Warren down 2, Biden is staying the same, but Bernie is up 6. Every candidate above 10%, only Bernie of those people is moving upwards. And Bernie has therefore expanded a large lead and made it a gargantuan one. And it also matters that because Bernie Sanders is so strong in New Hampshire, none of his competitors right now are above 15%. And that gives Bernie Sanders the chance, at least, to sweep every single delegate in New Hampshire. A lot of that is going to depend on whether or not all of those candidates stay below 15, or if they have pockets of support in the state where they're above 15. But there is the chance that Bernie could have a perfect run in New Hampshire. And this all matters because the first two states in the Democratic presidential primary process have massive predictive power, and they have for at least 45 years or so. Going all the way back to 1976, the person that wins both of these two first states has never lost the nomination. In some years, one of the candidates wins one and one of the candidates wins the other. In those cases, it's a bit hairier. But when the candidate wins both, they always go on to win the nomination. Back in 2016, Hillary won Iowa, very narrowly over Bernie. And Bernie won a convincing victory in New Hampshire. Hillary went on to win the nomination. But this time, with Bernie Sanders continuing a strong showing in New Hampshire, but showing a real chance of victory in Iowa, and potentially a decently sized victory, Bernie Sanders is the only one poised right now to win both of the first two states. There's a chance somebody else could win Iowa, but New Hampshire looks really good for Bernie. So Bernie Sanders, like Jimmy Carter and like many others, could go 2 for 2. In relatively recent electoral history, no one has ever lost under those circumstances. That puts Bernie Sanders in a fantastic position. And if you think the media is anti-Bernie right now, hostile to Bernie right now, paranoid about Bernie right now, just wait until Bernie Sanders wins both Iowa and New Hampshire, because they will try to deny that that has meaning. They'll try to say that Iowa and New Hampshire are very small states. They'll try to say that Iowa and New Hampshire don't have a ton of delegates relative to the final total. They'll try to say that Iowa and New Hampshire are not diverse states reflecting the, complexity of the Democratic Party or of American society. And none of that is necessarily wrong. But the fact remains that in the broad history of the last 45 years of the Democratic Party, when you go 2 for 2 in Iowa and New Hampshire, you win the nomination. And they can't really deny that history. There's been different contexts and different times and different presidents and different primaries. But if you go 2 for 2, you win. And I'm not saying this so that Bernie Sanders supporters get complacent if and when Bernie Sanders wins both Iowa and New Hampshire. You still have to fight for every single last vote, every single last delegate. But it is to say that history will be on Bernie's side, and that all of the narratives about Bernie not being able to win will become even harder to sell because of the history that we understand. Bernie Sanders and his people are in a fantastic position. It's not just the polling. It's the fact that Bernie Sanders has tons of volunteers, has had massive rallies in both Iowa and New Hampshire, has tons of donors in these states but all over the country, and has tons of people fighting for him to win these two crucial opening states. Bernie Sanders is on the precipice of building the momentum you need to win this whole primary process. The next 8 days are crucial. Today, the focus is Iowa, certainly, but right after the Iowa caucus ends, tonight even, as soon as those results are in, New Hampshire becomes the focus, because I am very confident Bernie Sanders is going to win Iowa today, and I am extremely confident Bernie's going to win New Hampshire 8 days from now. And when that happens, there's going to be an immense push against Bernie from the neoliberal media, and an immense attempt to try to deny what the history of winning both Iowa and New Hampshire means. We as Bernie Sanders supporters have to do our best to assert that history and assert the fact that the momentum and that the Democratic Party base is solidly behind Bernie Sanders.